Hello, Our Lady Perpetual Help. I'm glad to come back to speak to you a little bit more about the Narnia series. Today, focusing on the book A Horse and His Boy. Probably one of the least or less known of the seven. It's definitely an interesting story. I find it's a little bit more focused on the characters as opposed to the story itself. So the character development of Shasta and Bree and Hwyn and Ervis are much more focused than you would see, I guess, in some of the other books. Also, Aslan is much greater play. Well, you see Aslan's actions a little bit greater throughout the story of Horse and His Boy. So let's just go into the story. I'm gonna again go over Horse and His Boy. So if you hadn't read it, you'll sort of know the basic and maybe be inspired to read it later. The Horse and His Boy begins with Shasta, the boy in the story, and his father, who is just a man that is taking care of Shasta, but Shasta thinks he is his father. A Tarkhan, which is a lord of the land that he's in, comes to visit his father and actually is going to buy Shasta. Shasta is a little relieved because it's revealed that Shasta is not this man's father, and he said, he never really loved him, and he knew that he should a boy should love his father. So he's relieved that he doesn't love this man and that he's not his father. And so, after finding that he's going to be sold to this Tarkhan, he goes out to the stable and sort of starts to imagine what his life is going to be. And he speaks to the horse, just sort of because he's wondering if this Tarkhan is a good person. And he said, "Well, I bet this horse knows." And the horse perks up and then begins to speak to Shasta. And they're not in Narnia right now. But Narnia is a land that is far from where they are. And this horse is from Narnia. And you come to find out the horse's name is Bree, and he's from Narnia. He was captured when he was young and brought to this land to live and to be a slave. And so he wants to escape. And Shasta wants to escape as well, especially after Bree lets him know that the Tarkhan is not a nice man, and being in his service would be not good for Shasta. So the horse and his boy leave the place and go on to a bigger city. And so on their travels, Shasta has to learn how to ride Bree. He's ridden a donkey before, but never a horse, and Bree is a particularly big horse because all the talking animals, for the most part, the smaller animals are made bigger when they become talking animals, when Aslan turned them into talking animals, as we learned in Magician's Nephew. Aside from the elephants, who became a little bit smaller, most of the animals grow bigger. So Shasta had never ridden a horse, and let alone a big horse like Bree. So he has to learn how to do that. And Bree, being a charger, big horse, is used in combat, and so he's got some of that pride and maybe full of himself. And Shasta doesn't. Shasta is very humble and is just trusts Bree to lead him. So on their journey, they are talking and getting to know each other. And they're on their way to a town, and it so happens that they hear a lion's roar. Shasta, not knowing what a lion is, doesn't really know what's going on, but Bree had met lions before and is very fearful and takes up a gallop to get away. Well, it so happens that another horse and a rider is nearby, and so that lion chase them, and they come together. And then there's two lions, or what seems to be two lions, chasing the other rider and their horse, and Shasta and Bree. and they cross over an inlet, and the lion doesn't finish chasing them. It stops at the inlet, but the two horses and the two riders come together, and they come to meet the other horse, and which is Hwin and Erebus, and so we get to learn who Erebus is, and Hwin is another talking horse. So Bree hears Hwin speaking to Tarkina, the Tarkina, which is a term for a lady lord in that land, who is Erebus. And so Erebus is also trying to escape to Narnia with Hwin, also stolen when she was young, and been under the care of Erebus for so many years. And so Erebus is a daughter of a Tarkin, a daughter of a lord, and she is going to be forced, or she was going to be forced to marry someone who obviously she didn't love, and she came to not like at all, and so she chose to run away. She was going to actually kill herself, but Hwin talked her out of it, speaking to her for the first time, revealing that Hwin was a talking horse. And so Erebus decides to run away with Hwin to Narnia and the North, which is the tagline that Bree says. Narnia and the North is sort of like that's where they're headed, as well as sort of showing them going up, traveling up to the place where they're meant to be. And so Erebus and Hwin and Bree and Shasta all travel together. And so it happens that they have to cross through a big town because that's the only way they know how to get to know where they're going. And while they go into this big town, they encounter a whole bunch of lords and ladies that are coming into the big town. It's where the king of that area lives. And so while they're standing to the side, many lords and ladies cross, and they see Narnians, which is a different sight than the local lords and ladies. There's a lot of joy Shasta sees in the Narnians where they don't really see in maybe the lords and ladies of the area they're in. And while they're passing, the Narnians see Shasta, and they mistake him for Corin. And so they grab him and take him and say, you're supposed to be with us. You caused Lady Susan, who's the queen of Narnia from The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, one of the four. This takes place during that time when they're kings and queens of Narnia. And so Queen Susan meets Shasta and thinks him Corin, because Corin had apparently run away. And so he is in the Narnians' group and taken to where they live, where they're staying, and hears all the things that are going on in the Narnians, where Bree and Hwin and Erebus are left behind, and they don't know exactly what happened to Shasta. They just know that he went with the Narnians. And so it turns out the Narnians are there because Susan was courting or being courted by Rabbitash, who is the prince of that land. And she has come to recognize that Rabbitash is not as charming and as nice as she would have hoped. And so she wants to be gone, but they aren't willing, that country is not willing to allow the Narnians to return home without allowing Susan to be the bride of Rabbitash. So Edmund and Susan are talking and saying that we need to make a hasty escape with, being shrewd in their decisions, deciding to say that we're going to have a great party on our boat, and then so that allows them to go to their boat, and then instead of having a party the next day like they were supposedly preparing for, they would then leave at night to be away. And so that's what they plan on doing. And of course, Shasta hears over all this, and he feels like he's not supposed to hear, obviously, which they think he's Corin, but he doesn't want to reveal himself because he's afraid that maybe the Narnians would treat him or send him back as a slave back to his father, or worse, executing him as a traitor, as was common in that area. So he continues to pretend to be Corin and has a nice meal that they provide him, and he falls asleep. He's awoken when the real Corin comes in through the window. And so Corin and Shasta meet, and they look exactly the same, except for the clothes, of course, that Shasta was wearing. They got rid of them and gave him some nicer clothes and took care of him and gave him nice things, like I said. And so Corin and Shasta meet, and they recognize they look the same, and Corin wants to make use of this opportunity, since they look the same, to play tricks on the other Narnians. But Shasta's like, I need to leave now because because I'm trying to meet with Erwin and Hwin and Bree to be gone. And so they sort of had a place that they were going to meet once they got through the city. Also, happenstance was that Shasta came to know a better way through the desert, because they have to cross this big desert to get to Narnia. So that's important that he learns that in the company of the Narnians. But so Corin and Shasta sort of become friends in this 2-minute exchange, recognizing their likeness, though they're from two different worlds. And so Corin says when they get to Narnia, which they say, Shasta says we're escaping to Narnia, to look up Corin so they can, meet again on the other side. And so Shasta leaves and goes out to the place which is outside the city, to these tombs, to look for Bree and Hwin and Ervis. And once they get out, when he gets out there, the gates close because it's evening, and he doesn't see his other company, so he has to wait in the dark of night. And we'll just continue with his story, and then we'll go back to what's happening with Ervis and the other two horses. But he's by the tombs, and it's dark, and he hears these howlings, which it turns out are jackals, but he doesn't know what that is. But he finds a big cat, and the big cat is there and sort of comforting him when he's in sort of a sorry state. And the big cat actually scares away the jackals, which he doesn't really know what's happening there, but he's protected by this cat. He doesn't recognize necessarily what it is or what's happening there. It's revealed later that it's actually Aslan, a lion. You would think it would be a little bit more recognizable, but it's just the magic of Aslan, the magic of Narnia. And so he stays there through the night and waits there till the morning, until a groom brings two horses, which he finds out are Hwin and Bree. And so he waits there until Ervis shows up. So what happened with Ervis and the two horses is that she met a friend that she knew from her old life. And she gets in with their company, and they take the two horses as well. And she implores the help of her friend, and tries to figure out where to go, because they don't really know exactly where they're going yet. They know they're going to Narnia, but they don't know exactly how to get there. And so her friend, the interaction between Erebus and her friend, come to. It shows some of the dynamics of Erebus, and sort of the pride that she needs to put away as she's entering into a new land, and putting behind her the way of life that she had before in this current country. But they end up in the palace, and they encounter the king of that land, and they hide. They have to hide because they don't want to be found out, since Erebus is running away from her father, and her to-be husband, the husband that she was supposed to marry, Erebus' husband, is the chancellor to the king. So they both hide, Erebus and her friend, and the king comes into that room, and there's this secret meeting between the counselor, the king, and Rabbadash. And Rabbadash wants to chase after the Narnians, but the king doesn't want to be in open war with the Narnians. And so Rabbadash convinces the king to let him go without, publicly announcing that he is doing the king's will, but that he might start a war with Archenland, which is the land in which Kor lives. It's the connected kingdom to Narnia, and Narnia and Archenland are neighbors and allies. But this big country has not attacked, or has not conquered them, but he wants to. And so he wants to do so in a covert way. And through Rabbadash's pride and desire to get Prince or Queen Susan for himself, the king was allowing Prince Rabbadash to do what he wants. So they go they're traveling to Narnia with 200 soldiers, 200 horses, to try and take Archenland and then into Narnia covertly. So hearing this, Erebus is definitely concerned, also, thinking maybe a little bit less good things about the country that she's from, and how they're doing this sort of covert war and doing a surprise attack on Archenland. But because she encounters this, she's able to let Shasta and Bree know, as well as Hwin. And so it so happens that they are, allowed to go in the morning, and they lead the horses out with the groom to take it to Shasta, and then Erwin comes and meets them as well. So they're all back together outside the main city, the capital of this land, with now a path forward, knowing where they're going, as well as a mission to try and save Archenland and Narnia. So this gives them a place and a purpose. But it was just a growing experience for both of them, as sort of one, Shasta gets to encounter Narnians and sees them to be good people, as well as Erebus encounters sort of the backhanded, hidden, nefarious nature of the country that she's in, and even compels her more to go to Narnia and be a part of that country. So the four of them now set out with purpose and a plan, so as to go forward. So Erebus, Hwin, Bree, and Shasta are back together, and they know they're going to Archenland to let them know that Rabidash and his 200 horse are going to attack them. And so they cross the desert in a certain way so as to keep them on path to an oasis. And so traveling across the desert is hard on the horses and hard on the humans. Shasta has no shoes, and so he burns himself during the day when he's traveling. They're able to travel a little bit more free as they're in the middle of the desert. They don't have to worry about being captured. They just need to get there quickly because they're trying to race Rabidash and his entourage to let Archenland know of his coming. The Erebus and Shasta continue to have sort of like these spats, and it continues, and you sort of see sort of this dynamic that sort of needs to be broken, where Shasta and Erebus don't really get along, but on their travels, they're moving along. And interesting things happen in this last little stint of their journey towards Archenland. One, they sort of recognize, they think they're going as fast as they can, but they've been in captivity for so long. Hwin and Bree have been in captivity so long that they've only really been pushed through spurs and the whip of horses for the normal riding of horses. And so when they have the freedom to do on their own, they don't necessarily push themselves as hard as they could, even though they think they are. So it's, I think, a good reminder. Sometimes we need to be pushed, or we have the ability to do better when we're pushed than we even know ourselves. And so this comes to a head when they know the need to rush, but they're tired. And then again, a lion shows up chasing them. And it gives them the spurs to go quicker. And so Hwin and Bree both go as fast as they can, but the lion's faster and catches Erebus and actually scratches her. And Shasta decides that he's got to help her somehow. He doesn't know how. He doesn't know what he's doing. But Bree is unable to stop. He's too afraid. So Shasta jumps off Bree and stands before the lion and gets the lion to stop somehow. It doesn't even know how. But the lion checks itself and then backs away as if just as, I guess, surprised by Shasta's courage. And so Erebus is wounded, and the horses are, they're out of energy, and they encounter, thankfully at that point, this oasis, this respite with this old man, this hermit, and the hermit takes care of Erebus and takes care of the horses, but he says to Shasta that you need to hurry if you're going to get to Archenland before, to let them know that Rabidash is coming. So he runs on foot the rest of the way. And so he encounters this entourage of people, and they are King Loon and all his group of people. And so he encounters them for the first time and just lets them know, and they think again that he is Prince Corin because he looks just like him. And he gets them to recognize they need to go as quickly as possible to defend their kingdom from Rabidash. And they give him a horse, but because he's only ridden Bree and never worn spurs or used the reins to direct the horse, he keeps up with the group for a little while as they're going back to their kingdom. But the horse soon recognizes, being not an intelligent horse, just a normal animal, recognizes that he's not in control and he's not really forcing the horse to go quickly. And so he slowly falls behind, and night sets in. And he's just riding on this horse and doesn't really know what to do, trying to get the horse to go quicker. But he encounters sort of this fog, this mist, as night comes about, and their crew, the King Loon and all his people, go back to Arkenland, but Shasta sort of gets left in the mix and is in this mist and darkness, and again he encounters this presence, and it seems he doesn't know exactly what it is, but finally calls out to it and says, "Who are you?" And the voice says, "I have waited a long time for you to say that." And Shasta gets afraid. He says, "What's going on? Are you a ghost? I'm the most unlucky boy that ever was." And the voice says, "Why? Why are you unlucky?" And he's like, "Well, I've been chased by lions, and now I'm encountering you." And he's like, "Well, there's only been one lion." And Shasta says, "I just told you there's two in the beginning." And he said, "No, there's one. It's just a very fast lion, able to chase both Shasta and Erebus." And Shasta says, "How do you know?" And the voice says, "I was that lion." And so then it's revealed that this is Aslan. This is the lion that has been guiding Shasta this whole time. It's revealed that he saves Shasta when Shasta is only a child. That the lion that chased them helped bring the four together. The lion that protected him at the tombs from the jackals. The lion that is at his side now in his journey. And Shasta asks the very question, very reasonable question, "Who are you?" And Aslan says, "Myself." And he says it 3 times, sort of the recognition of both, our Christian understanding of Trinity, but then also just the philosophers' understanding of who God is, being, this threefold reality is sort of expressed in Aslan saying myself, and myself, sort of seeing different aspects of the world in his voice. But the 3rd time he says that, he appears to Shasta in light and then disappears, revealing that he's at the end of a pass into this world of Narnia. So he's crossed over Arkenland into Narnia by a mountain pass, and he encounters some Narnian animals and finally gets the Narnian animals to run and tell the kings of Narnia what has happened, and to send help to Arkenland. And again, he's actually taken care of because he spent the whole night traveling on this horse that hasn't really been following him, hasn't really been listening to him or allowing him to direct him. But these dwarves take him in and feed him breakfast as the Aslan animals let the king knows what's going on. And he has breakfast with, or dinner, or yeah, I guess it's breakfast because it's the morning now, and falls asleep. And he wakes up after several hours of exhaustion, and then he sees the entourage of the Narnians going to help the Archenland, and he's able to jump in with them, and he actually runs into the Corin and Edmund, King Edmund, and King Susan and Queen Susan and Queen Lucy are back. King Peter's out north defending Narnia from some evil giants, but this Narnian group, so Edmund and Lucy is there, as well as Corin and all these animals and giants, good giants, that are fighting with the Narnians to help Archenland. And so Corin takes Shasta under his wing and helps him to learn how to ride a normal horse, and they go on with the Narnians. And Corin and Shasta aren't really supposed to be in the battle, but they're being covert in following along and planning on joining into the battle. And so that's what they do. They follow along, and they encounter Rapidash storming Archenland's castle. And apparently they stormed the castle last night, but couldn't get in the gates because King Loon and everyone was able to get into the town before Rapidash got there. And was able to defend. So they took down a tree, and was taking a tree to try and break down the gates to Archenland. And so the Narnians come to help, and then the old man who's taking care of the horses and Erebus actually is able to see what's happening through a pool. So it goes back to them, and he explains sort of what's happening in the battle. And Corin and Shasta sort of get wrapped up in the battle, and it's sort of a crazy mess. But they all end up fine. The battle's finished, and Rapidash is defeated. His 200 horse are defeated, and Rapidash gets sort of caught up in a tree and sort of stuck. And so then they have to take him after the battle and figure out what to do with him. But it's revealed that King Loon and the Narnians speak afterwards, and Shasta is actually the son of King Loon, the brother of Corin, whose name is Cor. They were twins that were born at the same time. Well, Cor is a little bit older than Corin, so he's actually is going to be, the prince that will become king after King Loon dies. And so it's revealed that the land in which he was in stole him away because they heard that he was supposed to be a great defender against this land, and this is actually what he was destined to do. So when he was taken away as a slave and rescued, he was rescued by a knight, but then the knight died in keeping him alive, and then Aslan pushed him over to under the protection of the man who he thought he was his father at the beginning of the story. So it's a little convoluted, a little confusing there, but Shasta is actually Cor, the prince of Archenland, King Loon's son and Corin's brother. And so he's taken into that group and made to wear nice clothes and cleans up. But then after the battle, after everything, he wants to go and meet Erebus and Bree and Hwyn. And so he goes with a group of people now that he's a prince, and they want to present who he is to Erebus and everything. So we go back to Erebus and Bree and Hwin, and they're recovering, and they recognize Hwin really wants to go to Narnia, and Bree is sort of hesitant because, through the journey and not really knowing what it is to be a Narnian horse, sort of being in captivity all his life, sort of fighting against his own pride and silliness. And Erebus is sort of dealing with her own problems, recognizing how brave Shasta was, now Kor, was in defending her, and also Bree and Hwin as well, recognizing sort of the bravery and care that Shasta had for the four of them, or was just a great witness to what it is to be courageous. So Bree and Hwin and Erebus all sort of have these growing moments, but they're planning on going to meet with Shasta, but in that Aslan shows up, and so there's this great interaction between Hwin and Bree and Erebus, revealing, Aslan revealing himself to them, and it's just some funny moments where Hwin says, if you want to eat me, I'll let you eat me because you're such a beautiful a lion, and then just recognizing that Aslan is a lion, where Bree was convinced that he's not really a lion because lions are scary, and I don't, for him to be a lion would be crazy. And then Erebus coming to recognize why Aslan scratched her in the chase, because of what happened because in her escape, she had the maid sleep longer than she should have, which meant that she was punished, and so that was part of her story. That's another thing. Like Aslan says, you only get to know your story, which is an important aspect, I think, of our own lives. How God, why God does what He does in our own lives is for our good, and it doesn't make sense necessarily to other people. It doesn't even make sense to us at the time, maybe. But this knowledge that we only get to know our own story. So Bree and Hwin and Erebus meet Kor, or Shasta, and recognize that he is king, and the great thing that his and become friends. And it's revealed later that Erebus and Kor get married, as they fought so often as children. They grew up with and got married so they could do that more often, because that's, oftentimes you have lots of arguments with your spouse, so it's just sort of a funny critique that he brings up, that C.S. Lewis draws upon. Bree and Hwin are welcomed back into the community of Narnia. They don't get married in the future, but they're friends for their whole lives. Kor becomes the king of Archenland, and is a great king. Just one more thing, the whole story of Rabbadash. Rabbadash refuses to take the mercy of, now that Aslan's there, he's sort of leading and helping King Lune come up what to do with Rabbadash. And so Rabbadash continues to, be prideful in a place where he should be accepting mercy and being humble. And so Aslan turns him into a donkey. So he becomes Rabbadash the Ridiculous. And he becomes a donkey and is sent home to be back to his own kingdom. So they give him the mercy of allowing him to go back home. But if he leaves his homeland more than 10 miles away from his homeland, he'll become a donkey again. So by that punishment, he becomes a very peaceable king when he becomes king. So Rabbit the Ridiculous. We can talk about that a little bit more on Friday after this video comes out, and you think about that. But the story of A Horse and His Boy, again, is a great sort of witness of the journey of figuring out who we are, as all these stories sort of have that reality, but then also that self-growth that we all need to encounter. We see with Bree and Aravis, as well as Hwin and Shasta or Kor, sort of recognizing how God had worked with them, how Aslan had worked with them in their life, and helping them to be where they're supposed to be. So I look forward to speaking to you a little bit more about Horse and His Boy this coming Friday, and I look forward to being with you again. Talk to you soon. God bless you. And then also next time, just remember we're going to do Prince Caspian, which will be back with the 4 original with Peter, Edmund, Susan, and Lucy. So that'll be good the following week. I hope you enjoyed the story, and I'll talk to you soon.